Good afternoon and welcome to today's lecture, Tonalamatl as Talking Book, Conversing with Time Persons in the Key to Life, a lecture by Dr. James Maffie. We are speaking to you from the University of California's Latinx Research Center. It is an interdisciplinary and trans-America's research hub focused on the lives, experiences, challenges, and contributions of the diverse community of communities that is the Latinx population of the United States. I'm Laura Pérez, chair of the Latinx Research Center and professor in the Department of Ethnic Studies and the program of Chicanx Latinx Studies. I warmly welcome and thank philosopher Dr. James Maffie, who joins us today. And I thank all of you joining us today, including my esteemed colleagues, the members of the Latinx Research Center's Decolonial Knowledges Research Initiative, who have organized today's panel and will be introduced shortly. We very especially welcome Dr. Juan Berumen and his Chicanx Latinx Studies Special Topics Upper Division course, Chicano Indigenismo. A word about the format of today's event. After introduction of the DK group and of Dr. Maffie, Dr. Maffie's lecture will be about 45 minutes to an hour, and then the DK group will then have the opportunity to ask a round of questions before we open questions to the public and Dr. Berumen's class. The program will conclude in 2 hours at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So next, I would like to introduce Dr. Cecilia Titizano La Fuente, Director of the Latina/O Theology and Ministry Leadership Network at the Jesuit School of Theology at Santa Clara University and the Berkeley campus. She is a member of the Decolonial Knowledges Research Initiative, and she will in turn introduce the Decolonial Knowledges group. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Laura. It's such a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. The Decolonial Knowledges and Pluriversal Research Initiative is made up of an interdisciplinary team seeking to engage national and international scholars who are also working to advance our thinking about decoloniality and pluriversality. I'm going to list the names of our members, our team, so as we come to ask questions, people will be able to identify us. Laura Pérez is part of the team. Dr. Patricia Baquedano-Lopez, professor in the School of Education. Abraham Ramirez, PhD candidate in the Department of Ethnic Studies, focusing on philosophy and critical thought. Luiza Bastos Lages, graduate student in the Department of Ethnic Studies. And we are thrilled to have as our guests Dr. James Maffie and Dr. Juan Berumen in his class. That will be my pitch.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you. And now we'd like to ask Abraham Ramirez if he would please introduce Dr. Maffie.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Cecilia, and thank you, Dr. Maffie. I just have a few words and a quick bio for your introduction here, and then we get started. Dr. James Maffie received his BA in philosophy from UCLA and earned a master's from the University of California, San Diego, and his PhD from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. He is presently Emeritus Senior Lecturer in the Department of History and affiliate of Religious Studies, American Studies, Latin American and Caribbean Studies programs, and at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Maffie has taught at Colorado State University, at Cal State University Northridge, at North Carolina State University, and he teaches courses in Aztec philosophy, Indigenous Andean philosophies, Indigenous philosophy of North America, post-colonialism, Africana philosophy, Latin American Caribbean philosophies, and world philosophy. Dr. Maffie's book, Aztec Philosophy, Understanding a World in Motion, was published in 2014. He also has published articles in NAWA Newsletter, the American Philosophical Association newsletter for Indigenous philosophy, the Inter-American Journal of Philosophy, the Ibero-Forum Revista de Ciencias Sociales and Science, Religion, and Culture, and has contributed chapters to A Companion to Latin American Philosophy, an Introduction to Latin American and Latinx Philosophy, and Comparative Meta-Ethics, Neglected Perspectives on the Foundation of Morality. He's currently working on a second book tentatively entitled Conversing with Time, Understanding Aztec Calendrical Divination, where he argues that the pages of the divinatory books serve as portable altars that make present the living time persons of the Tonalpuali, or sacred 206 Tonali count, the 260 day calendar, and in doing so makes these time persons visually, epistemically, and conversationally accessible, where they make the visible invisible visible and the invisible audible. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. James Maffie to the Latinx Research Center's Decolonial Knowledges and Pluriversal University Research Initiative. Welcome, Dr. Maffie.
Thank you for that generous introduction, Abraham. Thank you also, Laura, for inviting me, and Daniel, for who's not faced for all the help. Thank you all at the Latinx Research Center and the Department of Ethnic Studies. Thank you all for inviting me, being so gracious, hospitable, and let's start and have some fun. So the topic is the Tonalamatl as talking book, conversing with time persons in the key of life. I'm borrowing bits and pieces of that title from two Stevie Wonder albums, those of you who are old enough to remember Talking Book and Songs in the Key of Life. But this title came to me. Unfortunately, I don't think that could serve as a title for a book. And here you see a panel of the fifth Trecena from the Codex Tonalamatl Alban. So let's proceed. That happened. So these codices, as they're called by scholars, are pretty much one single strip of paper, or in others can be deer hide, but they are folded up accordion style. And this enables the reader of these books, or the interactor with these books, to pull out more than one page in any given time. Here's another photograph of them, so you get a sense of what these are like. These fold out into very, very long strips of paper or deer hide. Okay, so here is just another example, a close-up of one of the pages from the Codex Borbonicus. This is the 8th Trecena with Mayahuel. Here you can see being the dominant time person of the Trecena. And let's see, I go back one. This is a close-up of the 5th Trecena with Chalchihuitlique, the dominant patron or governess or time person of this 20-day period. So let's proceed. All right, so here's the puzzle I'm starting with. Bernardino de Sahagún devoted book 4 of his monumental Historia General de las Cosas de Nueva España to the art of divination. And on page 4, his Nahua informants relate the following. And this count of days, the Tonalpohualli, so it was claimed, was made manifest by the two called and named Oxomoco and Zipactonal, who gave it to the people. Oxomoco they painted as a woman, and Zipactonal as a man. They who were the reader counters of the day signs, the Tonalpoque, embellished their book of days, the Im Tonalmau, with their presentations, their Imish Ipla, which they placed in the middle when they painted them, for it was said that they became lords of all the day count. So here's the puzzle. The paint and ink paper figures of the Tonalamatl are said to be Ishiplame or Te Ishiplahuan. And what does it mean to say that they are Ishiplame or Te Ishiplahuan? What exactly is an Ishipla and what exactly is a Te Ishipla? My focus in this talk is going to be those sections of the Tonal Amau, or the divinatory codexes, such as the Codex Tonalamatl Albin, Borbonicus, Borgia, Feher Very Mayer, Cospi and Loud, devoted to understanding the Tonalpohualli. I focus specifically upon the Codex Tonal Alban and Codex Borbonicus due to their Mexica provenance and their compact ordering of the paint and ink figures. My argument won't concern tax records, tribute records, migration accounts, dream books, so forth. The Florentine Codex, at least on page 4, is silent on these. So here's what I'm going to be arguing for. The paint and ink and paper configurations that Teishi Plahuan of the Tonalamatl make ontologically present the living time persons, for this just Tlaloc, Tlatzolteotl, Mayahuel of the Tonalpohualli. The Tonalpoqui's understanding of the Tonalpohualli derives principally from conversing with these time persons. The paint and ink paper configurations do not function principally as units of semasiographic communication. The Tonalpoqui's understanding of the Tonalpohualli is not exhausted by reading or performing these configurations, be they construed as pictures, writing, icons, signs, images, or scripts. The defining purpose of the Tonalamatl is to put human beings in direct, perceptual, metaphysical, interactive, conversational, and ultimately epistemological contact with the sacred personage of the Tonalpohualli. The Tlaquilo, the scribe or painter writer, does this by making the time persons ontologically present on the pages of the Tonalamatl, which by doing so makes them visually present and recognizable, but more crucially, communicatively, interactively, and epistemically present. Here are some basic terms just to start on the same page. There's tonali, which is defined typically as life force associated with life, heat, vigor, personality. It's also refers to a day sign and fate. It's distributed by Tonatiuh, the sun, according to the ordering of the Tonalpohualli. The Tonalpohualli itself is a repeating cycle of 13 numbers times 20 day signs, which gives us 260 qualitatively different kinds of tonaltin, it's the plural of tonali, or days, times, or fates. And those are names like 4 Olin, 7 house, 3 rabbit, 9 lizard, and so forth. A trecen is one of 13 20-day periods constituting the Tonalpohualli. Amat is the Nahuatl word for the paper, which is the flayed tree bark. The Tonalamatl is literally tonali paper, tonali book, book of tonali. Pohua, tlapohua mean to count something, read, recount, relate, pray, to assign something, to give an account of something. So the tonal, what one does in approaching the text is do that. So Tonalpohualitzli is the process, the activity of counting, relating, reading, giving an account of tonali. The Tonalpoqui, he or she who engages in that activity, is the one who counts, relates, reads, gives an account, or perhaps prays regarding the tonali. The Teoamoshli just means sacred text. Tlaquioli refers to the design of any kind, be it weaving, painting, sketching, sculpting, anything painted, written, or designed. And that's what we find on the pages of the Tonalamatl. Amash Pohua is to read a book. Amosh Itoa, to speak the book, to talk the book, to book speak. Caveat, generally speaking, as I'm sure you all know, translations are always very heavily theory laden, and we need to take them with a grain of salt. I don't think we need to be overly bound to the translations offered to us by Molina or Sahagún or Duran in the 16th century, but they're a starting point. Okay, so here a quick, so we get up to speed on what the Tonalpohualli is. It's this constant, this repeating cycle of 260 days. You have 13 numbers on your visual left, and then the 20 day signs on the right. This is by Richard Townsend. It's done with wheels, which people tend to like. But so this is repeating. So you end up with 1 rabbit, 2 water, 3 dog, 4 monkey. Elizabeth Boone portrayed it this way since she thought this would be more compatible with Mexica ways of thinking as a footpath. But you still get the same idea. You have this repeating cycle of 13 numbers in 20 days, and they catch up with one another and repeat every 260. So you have a calendar, if we want to call it a calendar, which is 260 days long. Okay, so you get an overview of what my argument is. The paint ink paper, and I will hyphenate all those together because the paper the figures are not simply painted in ink on paper. The paper is part of the constitution, the material, the metaphysical constitution of the figures. The paper contributes something. These figures are Teishi Plahuan. We get that from Sagun. The painted in ink paper Teishi Plahuan or Teteo Teishi Plahuan, that is to say, their deity or Teot or God or other than human presences, embodiments, personifications who are ontologically consubstantial with as well as identical with their Teot. 3, the paint ink paper Teishi Plahuan make present these deities or time persons of the Tonalpohualli. 4, after conversing with his deodalized heart, the Tlacuilo uses paint, ink, and paper to make ontologically present the time persons of the Tonalpohualli on the pages of the Tonalamatl. 5, the paint, ink, paper Teishi Plahuan of the Tonalamatl are therefore not first and foremost representations, signs, depictions, symbols, or likenesses. Moreover, they're neither conventional, arbitrary, nor a matter of artistic creativity. 6, the time persons and the gods generally routinely communicate, converse with human beings orally. They speak to us. They listen to us and they speak to us. 7, like all Teishi Plahuan, the paint, ink, paper Teishi Plahuan of the Tonalamatl are time persons who routinely speak. That is to say, who communicate and converse orally with humans. Like all Teishi Plahuan, the paint and ink paper Teishi Plahuan of the Tonalamatl possess organs of communication, as Daniel de Hoove puts it, with which they communicate with human beings. 8, the Tonalamatl acts as a portable Tlaishpamit, that is to say, an ordered paper one stands before, an altar, or contemporary Nahuatl speakers in Mexico refer to altars as mesas. That which makes the time persons of the Tonalpohualli metaphysically present, perceptually, visually present, communicatively present, interactively present, and epistemologically present. Using the Tonalamatl as Tlaishpamit, the Tonalpohualli converses with the time persons of the Tonalpohualli, that is to say, puts practical questions to time persons, listens to their responses, and conveys their responses to their clients. 10, the Tonalpohualli gains merit through fasting, sexual abstinence, and gifting. B, consumes so-called entheogens such as Teohnanakat, Teotlacuali, and Olioki that enable human deity communication. And C, speaks to time persons using Nahuatl Doli, right? Hidden language. Hence, the Tonalamatl is not principally writing a graphic recording system, a performance script, an astronomical calendar or ephemeris, proto-scientific textbook, mnemonic device, repository of accumulated wisdom, container of universal knowledge, or a portal or window into Lo Más Allá, the future, the world of the gods, as is most commonly argued. Okay, so what is a ishipla or a te ishipla? An ishipla, plural is ishiplame, and a te ishipla, and te ishipla is simply the possessive form of that, means the ishipla of someone. Its plural is te ishiplahuan, is traditionally translated as representative, image, substitute, stand-in, impersonator. Both contain the words ishtli, face or surface, and ship, meaning surface, peeling, or flame. Lopez Austin glosses them as container or envelope of the divine. In what follows, I'm going to keep talking just in terms of Teishipla. More recent scholarship maintains a Teishipla unconceals, discloses, reveals, manifests, displays, personifies, embodies, and presents or makes present a teot or powerful other than human person. Here's a list of scholars who defend this claim. In the process of making present the Teishipla of a time person on the pages of the Tonalamatl, the Tlacuilo makes present the full powers, agency, vitality, capabilities, and person of the time person. The Teishipla enables humans to make direct contact with the time person. So, Teishipla is a configured paint, ink, and paper that is metaphysically consubstantial with and thus wholly one with, identical with a living time person or deity. It makes present and manifests the life energies and power of this time person. As such, a paint, ink, paper Teishipla is fully animate and agentive. For example, a paint, ink, paper figure of Tlaloc is Tlaloc. Tlaloc is fully present in the paint, ink, paper figure, just as Tlaloc is fully present in every instance of rain, thunder, and lightning. Analogously, just as Jesus is fully present in the host at Catholic Communion, just as the saint is fully present in her icon. So a paint, ink, paper Teishipla is simultaneously self-presenting and self-representing. That is, the notion of Teishipla collapses semiotic theories, distinctions between designator and designated, sign and signified, representation and represented, symbol and symbolized, icon and iconicized. A Teishipla is both symbol and symbolized because self-symbolizing, both sign and signified because self-signifying, both icon and iconicized because self-iconicizing. It is both, using Charles Sanders Peirce's distinctions, both prototype on the one hand and icon, sign, index on the other. So all those distinctions that modern semiotic theory presupposes and operates from are simply rendered obsolete. They collapse. The Teishipla is all of these things. So the paint, ink, paper figures of the Tonalamatl are meaningful. They carry meaning. What they mean, that is to say, their identity is conveyed to the Tonalpoki graphically by their colors, shapes, clothing, accoutrements, and so forth, all of which also contribute metaphysically to their identity, their being there on the page. So, brief side point, all of this happens because all the constituent elements of the figures contain life energy, contain oftentimes tonali energy, and what the Tlaquilo does is knows how to put these energies together in such a way as to engender, not create absolutely, or ex nihilo, but to engender a new being. So paint, you have organic and mineral substances chosen for the specific kinds of tonality they contain, and they're enomic, they're complementary interrelationships. The ink, tlili, has water and ash life energies in it. The paper, the amat, contains the life energies of flayed tree skin. There's a gesso that's also added to it, and I can't verify this now, but I suspect that it's also made from maize and water and serves to nourish the paper, right? The way it does with Mesoamerican weaving. So these life energies fuel the engendering of the animate paint and ink figures, as well as their own transubstantiation into living Teishipla. This, everything on this page, none of it's original to me. This has been argued by Danielle DeHuve, Dupe Garcia, Magaloni Kirpo, Russo, Bassett, Locke, Neurath, and Robertson. Back to the Teishipla. Qua Teishipla, the paint, ink, paper figures are fully energized, powerful living agents. They're people, they're persons, not lifeless, inert graphemes, writing, images, signs, symbols. And yet they do convey meaning. And thus I suggest we regard them as onto-semasiographic agents they enact, they perform, they embody what they mean. And I suggest we call this an agentive ontological semasiographic, that's a mouthful, isn't it? System, or an agentive semasiographic, slightly less tongue-tying system, given that the paint, ink, paper figures make ontologically present time persons. They are themselves time persons. They make present and they convey information about themselves, and they live and act and perform the meaning and information they convey. So how a Teishipla is visually configured and thus presented, clothes, colors, accoutrements, is neither conventional nor a matter of artistic creativity. Rather, this is gifted, revealed, or disclosed to the Tlaquilo by the relevant Tonopohuale time person in the course of the Tlaquilos conversing with his totalized heart. Tlaloc's paint and ink paper Teishipla for example, is no more conventional than our Tlaloc's manifestations of rain, thunder, and lightning. So what I'm trying to get away from here is that most people talk about these as artistic styles and artistic conventional. This is just a convention for representing Tlaloc. And I think that's totally inverted. It is Tlaloc who tells the Tlacuilo how Tlaloc wishes to be presented. So, Teishitlahuan speak. Generally speaking, Mexican metaphysics holds that to be alive is to move, to be enwinded, not sure that's a real word, to breathe, to make sound, and to speak. The paint and ink paper Teishitlahuan of the Tonalamatl are no exception. They are neither inert, mute, nor deaf. They possess what the Huv calls organs of communication, that is to say, eyes, nose, ears, mouth. And they speak to and with humans, just as other Teishitlahuan do, such as amaranth dough figures, sacrificial knives, human Teishitlahuan who are gifted, aka sacrificed during monthly festivals. The Tlatoani, the Mexica ruler, is he who speaks, and the Ekat Teishitla in offering 125 of the Templo Mayor. And just as do a variety of other communicating objects, as Astor Aguilera says, such as Tlaki Miloli, sacred bundles, mirrors, and so forth. So here we have the Templo Mayor, offering number 25. We have a flint knife monkey fur, Ekat, wind god Teishitla. He talks. Zoali, commonly used Zoali amaranth dough figures are created, given eyes, mouth, with seeds, and they're once created, then they're subsequently eaten. Statues and effigy figures, Tekpame, Tlatoani, Tlakil, Miloli, all of these, and mirrors. They all speak. And they resemble as well contemporary cut paper figures cut by Nahua and Otomi ritual specialists. So here's the Tekpat, right? Eyes, mouth, organs of communication. This is an other than human person who talks with us. Here's the monkey fur from the Teishitla, from the Templo Mayor. It is a communicating person, right? This notion of communicating object is wrong because they're not objects, they're subjects, they're persons. Here's an engendering of a Xiuhtecutli Xipla during Ixcali festival. Kind of a clever little picture there. Here are Teo Mamanke, the Teo carriers from the Codex Bodaruni. This is the Mexica migration. Each one of these bundles contain within it a deity, a god, and that god speaks to the Mexica as they migrate. Here we have from Alan and Pamela Sandstrom's most forthcoming book, Pilgrimage to Broken Mountain. There's this, let me get rid of that. The beginning of cut paper figures, and they end up looking like this. And they are Teishitla, and they can be dressed and adorned like this to become furthermore Teishitla, or they can be hung paper like this. And all these cut paper figures are Teishitla that make present the deities in this particular ceremony. So in many respects, what's happening with these cut paper figures, which have been studied extensively by the Sandstroms and other folks, is a parallel to what's going on with the Tonalamatl. Okay, what the Tlacuilo does, the painter, writer, scribe, engenders fully animate Teishitlahuan of the time persons by properly configuring paint, ink, and paper, makes metaphysically present these people. The Tlacuilo makes the invisible visible, right? Typically, these time persons are invisible. We can't see them. But what the Tlacuilo does and what the Tonalamatl does is make the invisible visible, so we know who to talk to. Vincent Stanzioni and Alan Christensen have suggested that the Maya gods in the Maya Quiche Popol Vuh give human beings the 260-day count after those human beings have had their cognitive abilities dimmed or diminished, as the Popol Vuh says, like breath upon the face of a mirror. We can't see anything anymore. And therefore, what we have in this place of being able to see the gods is a Tonalamatl. It makes present, makes visible those time persons that we need to speak to in order to understand what's going on in the cosmos around us. So the Tonalamatl comes to replace the, right, our original condition is being able to see everything everywhere. So the Tlacuilo gives the Teishiptlahuan organs of communication that enable the time persons to converse with us, to listen to us, to respond to our questions. So human beings' understanding of the Tonalamatl and the Tonalpohualli remains squarely ensconced within orality. So this isn't a book to be read, right? It's a book that enables us to talk with people. And if one wants to sort of talk decolonizing, I think one of the ways of decolonizing this text is to stop treating it as a reading book and start treating it as a talking book. So what the Tonalpoki does. The Tonalpoki acts principally as a conversant, not as a reader, a seer, or a visionary. He or she aims not at turning pictures into words, but rather at speaking with, listening to, and subsequently speaking for time persons with an eye towards the client's participation in the becoming of the fifth age. Reigning scholarship interprets the depictions of the Tonalpoki accompanied by speech scrolls as a Tonalpoki speaking, but assumes that the Tonalpoki are reading aloud a text, performing the text, or voicing their interpretation of the text to their client. Equally plausible, I think, is that the Tonalpoki are speaking with the time persons of the Tonalpohualli and orally conveying the time person's advice to their clients. So here's the carving of Sipactonon Oshomoko. Oshomoko is on the right. This is from the calendar tempo of Tlatelolco, and you can see here the speech roll coming out of Sipactonon's mouth. So people are going to standardly interpret that as him sort of reading the book aloud. And I think it equally, and in addition, can be, right, the Sipactono speaking with the time persons, having a conversation. Here's another image of Sipactono from a boulder outside of Yautepec. Here you see he's inscribing, and what caught my attention are these. Those figures are Ilhuit glyphs. They consist of double opposing speech scrolls. You can see that. They're found in context referring to the interpersonal oral communication or dialogue. The glyph corresponds to the verb ilhuia, to speak, which suggests a relationship between the codices, the Tonalpoki, and speech. The received interpretation of the glyph in this context is that said dialoguing is taking place between Tonalpoki and his or her client. Equally plausible, perhaps in addition, it can be polysemous. The Tonalpoki is speaking with, dialoguing with the time persons of the Tonalpohualli. The Ilhuit glyph captures two-way verbal exchange, a conversation with the time persons of the Tonalpohualli. Its association with the Tonalpohualli, the Tonalpoki, and the Tonalpohualli suggests dialogue between the Tonalpoki and the time persons of the Tonalpohualli. Understanding the Tonalpohualli appears linked to the world of speech, the spoken world, speaking language, that is to orality, and not with seeing or reading. What is the scope of this Ishipla or Teishipla claim? This gets complicated and so I won't have time to get off. But in short, these is a list of all the possible Teishipla on any given page. I'll give here's a page. And on this page, we have the following. We have one of 20 principal time persons of each Trecena. On this page is Chalchihuitlicue. We have 13 day lords or I would call them daytime lords, 9 night lords or nighttime persons, 13 volatiles, 12 birds, 1 butterfly, 1 through 13 day numbers. I think the numbers are actually persons or deities. And then 6 20 days or tonaltin, they're referred to day signs. And then we have the 260 persons consisting of the fusion of one of the 13 day number persons and one of the 1 through 20 day sign persons. 5 and 6 do not operate on their own. They only operate in conjunction as fused deities, as Lopez Austin mentions. And then finally, there's a host of miscellaneous things like, like here you see this decapitated head, you see people swimming, you see water, you see a variety of things in these. On this one, here you see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the number continues here. Let's see, here's how then we have night lords beginning here, day lords beginning here, and then we have the volatiles beginning here. So what the Tonalpoki needs to do is converse with these people. So it looks like a very, very complicated conversation. But in principle, really no more complicated than the visual interpretation theory, which is trying to balance all these, the meanings or the forces of all of these people. This is the ordering of them. You have your numbers, the day number persons, night lords are this way, this way, and then the volatiles. Okay. It appears as if the Tonalpoki converses on any given day, on any given trecena, with one of the principal time persons, one of the 13 day lords, one of the 9 night lords, one of the 13 volatiles, and one of the 260 Tonalpohualli time persons who are fused day numbers and day sign numbers. Okay. We won't go more into that. So the Tonalpoki specialize in knowing how to interact with time persons. This involves ritual preparation, fasting, sexual abstinence, consuming so-called entheogenic substances such as teo nanakat, olohliuki, pisiete, okli, tlapat, mishit, and teotlaquali, and perhaps entering an oratory. Contemporary diviners talk about entering oratories, dark spaces. They need to know how to speak properly to and thus make oral contact with the time persons using the special language of Nahualatoli, hidden words, secret speech, spoken words for addressing the hidden or the invisible, and Nahuatokai, spoken secret names, names for the hidden. So there's a special language that one has to use when communicating with the invisible, right? As I recall, Molina translates these terms as language of the sorcerers. And then C, establishing an interpersonal relationship by means of reciprocal gifting in order to merit the understanding and practical advice he or she seeks and receives from the time persons. Knowledge of the Tonalpohualli is a gift humans need to merit. So here we have page 21 from the Codex Borbonicus. We have Sipactonal on our left, and we have, Sipactonal on the right, Oshomoko on the left. Sipactonal has a tobacco pouch, incense bag, bloodletting instrument, typically used to merit or deserve knowledge, and possibly taking place within an oratory. And there are 2 deer heads there, and deer heads typically symbolize peyote. Okie doke. So the Tonalamatl as portable tlaishpami. A tlaishpami literally is an ordered, rowed, or arrayed paper things one faces. So there's an ordered, rowed, or arrayed paper things one faces. They're common in contemporary Nahuatl speakers refer to them as mesas, or we can call them altars. Each of the 20 Trecena pages is a tlaishpami. Given the highly transportable nature of the Tonalamatl acts as a portable altar, a highly portable assemblage of 20 Trecena altars that can be carried from place to place as needed by clients seeking to consult the Tonalpohualli. The pages of the Tonalamatl act as a portable altar or time place for interacting with, reciprocal gifting with, orally conversing with, and receiving knowledge from the community of Tonalpohualli time persons. As such, each resembles the contemporary Mesa study by Sandstrom and Sandstrom, Sharon Dow, Christensen, and others. The Tonalamatl itself is also live, as various sources, such as Durán, the Historia de los Mexicanos por sus pinturas and the Anales de Tlatelolco, all mention the Tonalamatl receiving gifts, in particular blood. While the Tonalamatl contains elements of graphic communication, which the Tonalpohualli must be skilled at interpreting or reading in order to determine the identity of the time persons with whom she is dealing, the Tonalamatl's principal function is to make directly metaphysically present, and in so doing, making interpersonally and orally accessible these time persons to the Tonalpohualli. To the Tonalpohualli. For it is with them that the Tonalpohualli converses, with them that she practically interacts and participates in relationships of reciprocal gifting, from them that she is gifted an understanding of the personalities and forces of the time persons acting on an even given day of the Tonalpohualli, and gifted advice concerning how to act, and finally with them that she co-participates in shaping the becoming of time. So the Tonalamatl acts as a perceiving place where the Tonalpohualli directly sees and recognizes the Tonalpohualli time persons. There she learns who the actors are, who must be conversed with, interacted with. B, it's a meeting place where the Tonalpohualli meets face-to-face the relevant time persons. A speaking place where the Tonalpohualli converses or communicates with the powerful time persons of the Tonalpohualli. It's a transacting place where the Tonalpohualli interacts with and exchanges gifts with time persons. It's a place of reciprocal interaction and gifting. It's a knowing place where the Tonalpohualli is gifted practical advice or knowledge from time persons concerning how to act, what to do. And finally, a human time-making place where humans try to influence, shape, and contribute to the becoming of future time through their transactions with time persons. As we all know, the cosmos is open to human participation, and the Tonalamatl and the Tonalpohualli make that possible. So the Tonalamatl is this portable Tlaixpamit. Each Trecena page also functions as a fractal microcosm of the macrocosmic constellation of active, powerful Tonalpohualli time persons and their interrelationships. As Alfred Gale puts it, the fractal figure, quote, demonstrates the property of self-similarity at different scales of magnification or minification, close quote. Microcosm and macrocosm are identical except for their scale. We might therefore say that the Trecena pages of the Tonalamatl fractally reiterate the ordered personified forces active during any given Trecena. Each page of the Tonalamatl consists of a fractal reiteration that consubstantiates the personal forces of the Trecena in play during any given Trecena. So here's a contemporary cut figures, which are Teixiplame on a mesa. This is a diagram of another mesa, the layout. So you have this notion of a Tlaixpamit as something which is paper things, road or ordered paper things one faces or stands before. This is a real life color photograph of such an array. This is from a cleansing ceremony. This is a diagram, right, capturing that. So all of these cut paper figures, they're all Tlahuan. I'm sorry. They are God presences, they're deity presences, they're right there, and the ritual specialists can directly and immediately interact with them. They enable him or her to identify, to see who he or she needs to talk to, converse with, and gain access to. Here we have another photograph from Sandstrom's forthcoming book, Pilgrimage to Broken Mountain. Here you have the Teishipalahuan that are cut there. They've been nourished, gifted, chicken blood, and now they're being decorated with palm fronds and marigolds to make it a more beautiful, attractive place of interaction. So what the Tonalamatl is not, here's a long list of conventional descriptions of the Tonalamatl. A flat, stable, stationary renderings that should be read as graphic abstractions of entities, qualities, events, times, locations, and sometimes sounds. An astronomical ephemeris, calendar, or almanac. Quote, and they stand for an entire body of indigenous knowledge, one that embraces both science and philosophy. Besides tracking time and its cycles, they describe the very structure and workings of the cosmos. By explaining the temporal and supernatural forces that shaped and governed the world, the books articulated its universal laws. Their goal was to express the unrepresentable, to provide through structured figuration and understanding of the invisible forces and principles. They were thus equivalent to our books of philosophy, theoretical physics, and astronomy. From Boone. It's a text with closed, fixed, and intrinsic meaning. It's a performative script, like a musical or choreographic script, or an ur-text, right, as Mikolska, Boone, Pohl, and Mundi claim. It's a record-keeping system, Boone, a repository of accumulative wisdom concerning God's mythic lore, ritual performance, Quinones Geber, a mnemonic device, Berdan, a portal or window through which one sees into lo más allá, the world of the gods, the great beyond, somewhere else. I don't, right? All of these, I think, miss the point. So, conclusion. The principle and overriding purpose of the paint and ink paper configured Teishipalahuan of the Tonalamatl is to enable humans to converse with time persons of the Tonopahwali so that they may practically participate in and shape the time-place becoming of the fifth age. The Tonalamatl function first and foremost as a sacred, powerful living altar, which gives humans direct access to the time persons of the Tonopahwali, and in so doing makes possible human conversations and interactions with these powerful time persons in the key of life. That is to say, with the overarching practical, not theoretical goal of shaping the future. Speaking rather than seeing is the principal medium of communication between humans, the Tonopauki, and the time persons of the Tonopahwali. Orality is at the very heart of understanding the Tonopahwali and of so-called calendric divination. Thus, there's way more going on in understanding Tonopahwali than reading, writing, and arithmetic. Humans' understanding of the Tonopahwali is squarely ensconced within orality. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. We are going to transition now to questions.
Okay.
Some of the questions are going to be coming directly from your presentation, but some of them are also going to be coming from your book and the articles that you sent. So you're going to see a diversity of questions coming your way.
I can handle that.
All right. Then good to know. The first question is this. And it's kind of brings both to your book and your presentation together. In your book, you argue that Aztec philosophy is pantheistic, so embraces a monism here, right? And in your presentation, you're talking about time people or time persons. So the question is about personhood, or the one in the many, or perhaps even talking about awareness, consciousness, and the native, this way of speaking about our brothers and sisters in us having a voice, a sense of self. So how do you understand personhood within this framework?
Well, so this, I mean, the presentation, I mean, what I presented today, I see is sort of an extension of the book. I could have argued to this conclusion if I had started out with all the conclusions of the book, namely pantheism and holism, and everything being interrelated. But I decided not to do that because there might be lots of people who object to those claims. So rather, I got to the pretty much the same conclusion by just focusing upon more modest claims about the nature of what a teishipla is. But ultimately, this is monism or pantheism. All the figures there are aspects of this one single sacred life energy called Teot. So persons happen to be sort of temporary, or not so temporary. I guess the deities, those powerful, other than human persons, tend to be much more eternal, don't they? But they're sort of constellations or congeries of powers. And those, depending upon what those powers are, what sort of energies there are, they have different personalities or characteristics. So if pantheism is the case, then pretty much everything is saturated and constituted and ultimately one with that sacred energy or Teot. And the cut paper figures that Sandstrom's study and the paint ink paper figures that I'm looking at are simply aspects of that energy.
Okay, and if I can follow up there, then in your book, you account for this, the one and the many, and the diversity that we see it from an epistemological point of view. How do we articulate, for example, the consciousness of humans, for example, or awareness of trees, for example, with Theo being this energizing force, but
Right.
Or is it all itself just self-manifestation of one thing, and what we are, what a human would be then?
Right. It's all a manifestation of Teot, metaphysically speaking, but typically we don't see it that way. In the book, I make a distinction between medieval European distinction between de re and de dicto, and we tend to see things under the categories or the descriptions of dog, cat, tree, plant. But one sees de re, right, object to object or subject to subject, one is looking at simply Teot. So yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to invite other members of the DQ group. Perhaps, Abraham, did you want to bring your question?
Sure. I have a question directly. I do have a prepared question, but I want to ask a more direct one as a result of the talk. I'm trying to understand, and forgive me for the reference to the Greeks. I'm trying to understand the relationship between the Tonalamatl,
Yeah,
and
the book.
and the time persons. I hear a little bit of crossover here with the ability to, or allowing the ability to speak, and taking away the ability to see the future in an almost Promethean analogy. Can you speak a little bit about the relationship between the Tonalamatl and the time persons?
So the Tonalamatl is the book, right?
Right.
You want to call it a book. And on the pages of that book are these paint ink figures, right? So the standard way of interpreting that is that those are pictures, images, representations, signs, icons, something, right? Of something else. So there's a metaphysical dualism involved. There's a distinction between sign and signified, representation and represented. And going back to the earlier question, right? If we're really embrace this monism and pantheism, I reject that dualism. So in fact, they're one and the same thing. I don't, yeah, I personally, I'm not an expert on ancient Greeks, don't see any, I mean, in terms of the Tonalamatl, I don't see any close parallels, but you can help me out on this. I mean, I see parallels with like the Oracle of Delphi, but this notion that one doesn't see the future, one hears the future. And then actually, this also resonates much with some indigenous Andean thought where, right, as I recall, the Sapa Inca and other Inca priests, right, where these large ear spools, and those ear spools enable them to hear the future, but they don't, but they deny that you can see the future. And as I recall, if I remember my Quechua properly, right, in Quechua, the past is in front of you and the future is behind you. So you can see the past, but you can't see the future. You can hear the future coming, right? Like you're standing on a bridge over railroad tracks and the train's coming, but your back's to it. You can hear that train coming, but you can't see it. You can only see it after it's passed. So it's hearing an orality or AUR orality, right? That is the key to the understanding what's going on, what's forthcoming. And there's this emphasis upon talking and speech, right? The gods give human speech to worship them with, right? If you look at the Popol Vuh, right? The gods give human beings so that the human beings can properly worship them. And all the previous creations get destroyed because they can't speak or they can't speak properly. But this is it. So speech is this very important thing, right? And the gods communicate with us through the spoken word. They don't send us messages. They don't write on tablets of stone on the wall. They don't do any of that stuff. They talk to us and we talk to them. And that's very, very sort of inconsistent, I think, with this emphasis upon interpersonalism, that is person to person dialoguing where knowledge gets transmitted, where things happen. Everything is a interpersonal relationship, right? I gift you, you gift me the knowledge I want, right? So the Tonalamatl is making that possible in this very nifty, economical, convenient way because it's a portable altar, right? I don't know the history of the use of portable altars or aras, I believe they're called in Spanish, than in Spain, but I could find you a portable black obsidian mirror altar that Nicholas Saunders, I believe, found. And it was used as a portable altar by the early Franciscans to convert people. And the fact that it's this mirror is important because for Native people, mirrors talk. I don't think mirrors are primarily to be looked in. I think mirrors are talk at you. And so in Sahagún often talks about the Tlamatinime, the wise person holding up a mirror to us as if we're seeing ourselves. I think he's holding up a mirror to us because that mirror is talking to us, right? Tezcatlipoca's mirror talks to us, right? And the mirror inside the Huitzilopochtli's sacred bundle, God embodiment, right? That thing talks to us, gives us orders, admonishes us, criticizes, advises us. It's all interpersonal. It's all talking. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah, that the last part was directly answered it. My analogy was that ethical ground of interrelationship where the Greeks feared their gods, or the Semitic tradition is a fear of the god. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't think the Aztecs or the Mexica fear their gods, although that's the standard interpretation that they're living in cowering in fear, trying to appease them all the time. Right? I mean, it's just not that relationship. The gods need us, right? If you read the Popol Vuh, the gods create human beings and they're enervated, they're wiped out. They need human beings to renew them, to reinvigorate them. And human beings reinvigorate them through the spoken word and through incense and copal smoke and other things. But the gods need us as much as we need the gods. That's the key difference, right? Right. And then you have this, the quite famous little saying we eat the gods and the gods eat us, or we eat the earth and the earth eats us. There's this mutual reciprocity going on, right? They feed us, we feed them, they feed us, we feed them. And that's all modeled upon the interaction, the interdependency and the reciprocity between in maize horticulture. We eat maize and maize eats us. We nourish, right? We feed it, it feeds us. We eat it, it eats us. We die to give it life, it dies to give us life. It's all this notion of reciprocity. And I think that's part of what's going on in the Tonalamatl. You need that reciprocity with the relevant, time persons, time deities, Tlatzolteo, Mayahuel. We need to gift them so that they give. Knowledge is a gift, right? So, well, good. Well, thanks for that question.
No, thank you. What I hear you also mentioning, it reminds me of Indian traditions here in the mesas. So the mesas are extremely important. And as you are presenting Aztec philosophy here, I also echoes how the mesas are places where make ontologically present the cosmos and his infinity and all the macro into a micro.
Mm-hmm.
And by making it micro, humans also are microcosms, right? And in that conversation that takes place, that I'm assuming that as you keep working while you're working at the ethics, that evolves out of those reciprocal relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, and I also
is it Aini, right?
El Aini, absolutely, Aini.
This notion of in Nahuatl it's Nepantla, this notion of balance, of reciprocity, right? That you get, and also, in the Andes, don't you huacas aren't these places of direct contact?
Yes, the huacas are special places, very similar to the higher manifestation when you go and interact with them, and are also dual complementarities. They're not just one single. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. The commonalities are amazing.
Yeah. I want to give opportunity to other members of the DQ. So I'm going to invite Professor Patricia Baquedano to present us with her question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to also connect reading the book, Aztec Philosophy, and your amazing talk today. The very illuminating and exciting shift that you invite us to make in the book, Understanding Aztec Metaphysics as a processual, resituates, as you note, an understanding of existence as becoming. This thinking is picked up in decolonial authors and writers too, in notions of borderlands, fluidity, Nepantla, as you mentioned, to spaces of ambiguity. And decolonial thinkers have proposed similar shifts to refuse strict categories, fixed understandings of the world. Today, your talk on the Tonalamatl, and I would like to focus on the Tonalpoki, which is the mediator. It's not the correct term, but the one who speaks, the one who facilitates, the one who is, making the connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I find, in reading the book that I kept thinking is, especially the first chapters, the emphasis on understanding energy and energy flow, and then to focus on orality, which is all vibration of the vocal cords, which brings in, creates a sonic landscape, a sonic ecology in the transactional moments, communicating with persons, right? And so brings me back to again, decolonial thought and multiplicity, and how talk is not just one code, but a multiplicity of codes, as you mentioned, hidden language, which must be also hidden languages. The language of whatever time persons speak, the language of the clients. So there's this rupture of multiplicities, if I'm understanding correctly, that happens in the transactional moment, which is multilingual, multimedia, multisemiotic, almost, because talk, is almost never just the sound, but the ecologies that come with it. So I have a simple question. The decolonial writers and authors are arguing, are writing against sometimes against fixed meanings, trying to break away from categories, right? And it seems to me that this work on the Tonalamatl, like the focus on energy, is also trying to disrupt potential fixity or fixed meanings. I suspect you might say, we don't know the answer, it's a mystery, but I wanted to ask why this view has this been a response to, from your work, as something that the Aztecs were trying to fight against, some in-place categories, or maybe there is no counter, that this is not a counter to anything, but why is it this way? Right?
Well,
And I
first
know
of all,
you're
that
going to
was
say
very
it's
eloquent.
a mystery.
I wish I had written everything you just said in my book. That was very nice, boy. So I don't think they're trying to counter the Mexica Aztecs. I don't think they're trying to counter anything.
Okay.
But I mean, everything you said about orality and speech and power and wind and breath and movement, right? Wind is one of the most potent forces in Mesoamerican thought, and lots of other people's thought as well, because it's you can't get maize without wind, because the wind brings the water to feed the maize. Wind is very important. So speech and orality just have the centrality, which I think lots of folks are overlooking. Why do they think this way? I don't know. I mean, I'm not quite sure what kind of an answer you're looking for, what kind of an explanation you're looking for. Are you looking for the standard sort of anthropologists, sort of what they call an etic explanation in terms of social political conditions, environmental conditions, material conditions, structuralism, or
Yes. I'm a linguistic anthropologist, so this is like kind of like that kind of sorry to interrupt, but this intersection is a bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to go to that, I mean, I don't know about wind, but I mean, this basic relationship with the cosmos, I think, is all rooted in maize horticulture. I don't think you can overemphasize the importance of maize. Right? I mean, maize is, I mean, if you probably know this, right? I mean, Alan Christensen has this paper entitled "You Are What You Speak." I think basically he's talking about Maya Deltal, I forget, who basically are impressed at how good he speaks Maya. And he doesn't, and they go, "Oh, you must be eating maize, because if you ate wheat, you couldn't talk that well." And then he speaks really well, and they go, "Oh, you must be eating local maize, because you can only speak properly if you eat maize and eat locally grown maize." And if you remember from the what is it, the Historia de Tolteca Chichimeca, when the Toltecs bring down some Chichimecs from the north one of the first things they do is feed them maize so that they can talk properly. Because if you can't speak Nahuatl, you can't speak intelligibly and coherently and clearly. And so all the other folks, the Otomi, the Purupecha, the Tepehua, they don't make sense because they don't speak, right? In a sense, their speech is disordered, and right. I don't want to
Right.
use words like civilized versus barbarian. They're too
Right.
messy. But how did we get on? So it's maize, and makes possible settled existence rather than being a chichimec, a wanderer, a hunter-gatherer. And if you look at the stuff from Sagun, people who live in the forest are likened to deer and rabbit. They're jumpy, they're skittish, they're disorganized, they're disordered. But if maize, it enables us to have settled existence and to have what we call, culture, right? Toltekayot, right? Art, poetry, music, singing. And so I don't know if that gives you an answer,
Yeah.
but it's maize.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. What a great question. That was fun.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Professor. Let's see. I want to bring other members of the DQ, perhaps Laura, if you want to ask a question. I also want to invite Dr. Juan Berumen. Perhaps he wants to ask a question.
Sure. I just want to say I really love the information sharing about eating local. So I try to do that wherever I travel, but I'll do that to try to improve my languages in an enjoyable way. I think I just really want to start by, well, thank you so much for that talk. It's really cool to see how this work that you're doing now is coming out of your amazing Aztec philosophy. I just really have to pause to say that while I'm not a philosopher, I read a lot of philosophy, and I think that I've never read anything like the project that you took on in Aztec philosophy. I think what you've done is to, I think, create a really important bridge that is not a translating away the difference of Mesoamerican thought, which is something that we worry about in every one of our disciplines. How do we talk about that which is not colonizing or even just centric to particular culture? So I think that, you're being able to talk about where in classical European thought, in classical Greek thought, we begin to see a binary, and how different even the possibility of seeing in a binary way, how that is so different from what you in that book so carefully talk to us about and share as being this energy, the self-same energy, which you've mentioned here, Teoto. The other thing about your book that I admire so much is that the way your proofs, right? The way in which you've practiced, right? There's a politics of scholarship there in which you've given place to the scholarship that interviews actual knowledge holders today that are Indigenous. So I'm very interested in how you continue to develop those kinds of relationships with people within Indigenous communities that are actually practitioners of these ancient knowledges. So that's one of the things, but I just want to begin by acknowledging this. So my question is actually really kind of, it's a kind of specific one now in thinking about your talk and thinking about the answers that you've been just giving to questions. So you talk in your presentation right now, ultimately in a really powerful, persuasive way, about our really being able to think about these books, these Tonalamatl. And when I say books, I mean, we really do want to put those quotation marks because we're always projecting what we understand as a book, right? And I think when we talk about philosophy, it's the same issue. We might be projecting what it is that we think philosophy is. I think you're really returning to our ability to think outside of the box that we've been within. You're returning at least to three-dimensionality. You're sharing these insights about the multiple dimensions upon which knowledge are made. So going back, you talked about these books, or quote unquote books, as being in truth a kind of a portable altar, right? I see that. And you argued it's because they are also, right? The books, the people, are all teotl. They're all this energy, this divine energy that is always the same, even though it manifests in different faces, right? So would it then also follow that everything is a portable altar? I mean, that question, right? I think that question has to, for me, the reason why that question matters is because I think it has to do with how we treat everything and what our capacity is to communicate with the divine, right? And we are the divine, but so what does this mean? An environment that isn't only ceremonial, right? So I would just like to hear a little bit more about how you've been thinking about these things.
Wow. Well, thanks for all that wonderful praise.
No, absolutely,
very-
well deserved. Thank
Very
you.
shy making. Yeah, I mean, you raise a good question. I haven't given it, the kind of thought it deserves. If we think about Tlaloc, right? And Tlaloc manifests himself as rain, thunder, frost, floods, all ways of water, lightning. I suppose I could, what you say, I suppose any body of water, a spring, a river, a lake, I could treat as an altar to Tlaloc, but perhaps only to Tlaloc. So how the Tonalamatl is going to be different is you have this whole, it just gives you access to a larger constellation or community of deities or other than human persons. And all of those are sort of concentrated on the pages of those books. And all of them are made present. You're absolutely right. The lake, the spring, there's Tlaloc made present right there. And presumably, yes, I could interact with Tlaloc, but I don't think I would have access to anybody else. Excuse me. What the Tonalamatl does is give us as an altar that gives us access to all these forces of the Tonalpohualli, which we can't see as clearly as a Tlaloc in a spring or Tlaloc in a hailstone or Mayahuel in a maguey plant, right? So I guess you're right. The sacred or the divine is in everything. And I think Tlaloc is sort of consubstantial with all Tlaloc's manifestations. So it could be altar, but sort of not as powerful or wide-ranging an altar that gives you an access to so many different, aspects of Teot or aspects of so many, deities, Mayahuel, Tlatzolteotl, Tonatiuh, right? All of them are all the night lords, the day lords, all of those people are there, and otherwise they escape my attention because they're invisible. So, I think you make a really good point. Everything is sacred, right? And of course, that doesn't mean we can't eat it, kill it and eat it, right? Which is a common mistake that, I think some sort of Western thinkers make, that if it's sacred, you have to respect it and can't kill it. But of course, nothing's more sacred than maize, but of course we have to eat it. And nothing's, I guess, more sacred than the gods, but we eat them all the time. Through maize, through water, through amaranth, and then they eat us, right? So I like that. That's a really good point.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Sure.
I think we have time for one more question from the DQ group.
Okay.
I wonder if there's anybody else who would like to ask a question at this time. I see there is one question here that it was presented, and it is about method. So I'm just going to read it. And it says, could you comment on your method and approach writing Aztec philosophy? They are refreshing juxtapositions of main exposition of your theses, arguments and examples, and of sections you have defined as supporting scholarship, which are rich in dialogue and discussion. Why this format? Is this intertextuality part of a larger goal and approach to empirical and theoretical work?
So my method. Well, I guess for starters, my method has always been to approach Mexica, Aztec thought / religion, thought, ideology / philosophy, whatever we want to call it, as something not to be explained away in terms of environment or political chicanery or material conditions, class, I don't know, whatever. I've always wanted to approach it the way I was trained to approach, rightly or wrongly, the philosophy of Plato or Aristotle or Kant. Namely, I look at it, I examine it on its own terms, I try to figure out what's going on in its own terms rather than, doing some sort of an analysis like Marxists do or feminists do, right, to explain things away. And so I've always seen it as a body of thought which needs to be understood in its own terms as much as possible. Of course, there are limits because not a native speaker, not Nahua, and I'm not a writing in Nahuatl. And so then sort of it's all very interdisciplinary to the extent that, one of the things I love about Mesoamerican studies is how interdisciplinary it is. There's art history, there's linguistics, there's ethnohistory, there's history, there's contemporary ethnography, there's archaeology, there's all this wealth of information coming from a variety of disciplines. And in my experience, it's one of the most sort of interdisciplinary fields around. And I really find that exciting. And I avail myself of findings readily from any of those fields to try to put together a coherent picture of how the Aztecs thought about the world. So I try also to ground it. In some sense, try to do what anthropologists call upstreaming. You go from contemporary ethnographies and you try to go upstream to the historic Mexica. I've found, the work of Alan and Pamela Sandstrom invaluable in that respect. Their work on cut paper figures and Ava Hunt and other folks. Yeah, so, and I guess the way I've tried to test it is to see whether or not the views I'm attributing to the Mexica explain how they behaved, right? Rather than just try to come up with an abstract system of thought which is internally coherent. I think it generally makes sense of what they did and how they acted. So I think that answers the question, but I'm not sure. So maybe the questioner can follow up and let me know if I fell short.
No, I think you do answer it well.
Okay,
And
okay.
that I think is one of the beauties of this new kind of scholarship. And I found a lot of echoes with your work and my work because I also approach it in a very interdisciplinary way, moving with contemporary disciplines and then going back to the old chronicles and so forth and so forth. So yeah, I hear you. I hear you well.
Let me throw in one thing. I read quite a lot of Andean scholarship, and one of the people who I like a great deal is Catherine Allen. Her book, The Life Hold Has. And in particular, she's got an article that's a review of a more recent book on Tipus. And the title of the review is Taking Animism Seriously. Yeah. And one of the things she does is say what, Quipu scholars are failing to get is that the quipu is an animate person. They're still trying to treat it as something to be read or decoded rather than something to be communicated with, and it communicated with persons. And that's, I mean, that's what I find the scholarship on the Tonalamatl to be lacking is, despite, I mean, there are these, most all the people working on the Tonalamatl today all recognize that these figures are Teishipla, that they have organs of communication, that they're embodied deities, that they're alive, that they're agentive, but then they never go the next step of saying, well, if they're alive and they're agentive and they have organs of communication, why aren't they talking to us? They just go, no, it's a book, it has to be read. And they back away from, from animism, or what another scholar calls the abyss of animism. It's like, no, that's a book. It's written down there. It can't talk to us. And that's exactly, what's going wrong, right? And that's, Catherine Allen saying that about the quipu helped sort of like bolster me in thinking, yeah, of course, we have to take animism, pantheism seriously, and that means that book is alive. And so I'll shut up.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of these earth beings, of these living beings that in Marisol de la Cadena talks about as tiracunas, right?
Right.
Earth beings, talking about animism.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to come to a close to this section of the DQ group interacting with you, Dr. Maffie. And I want to open up to the public, and we have a list of questions here. And for that section, I'm going to pass the baton to my colleague, Patricia Baquedano.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm happy to move us on to open. The questions have been sent, and we will select. I say we because Luiza is in the room too, and I also want to point to some of the questions. So generally the questions have arrived in two main categories. Categories about content and clarification, and the other category is more about the bigger project, the kinds of broader questions about the work. So we'll start with questions that are about content and seek clarification. And we have a question from Beatriz Herrera, and I'll read it. And it says, thank you so much, Professor Maffie. I have a question. Are Tonalamatl folded and pleated as some codices are? And if so, does that provide opportunities for wind and air to also interact with Tonalamatl in ways that are useful for altar making and invite wind energies? For example, I'm thinking of ways that flip books require wind and movement to come alive.
Wow, that's a great question. It never occurred to me, but I think that's really an intriguing possibility. Folding generally is a way of ordering things for the Mexica. You fold blankets, there are folds in the layers of the cosmos. But it didn't occur to me that you take them out and you fill them with air when you unfold them. That's really neat. I like it. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'll have to think more about it. Thanks, boy. Very neat.
There's another question about content. And that's from Rebecca Mendoza Nunciato. And the question reads, so glad to be here and really enjoy this talk, Dr. Maffie. Will you talk about agency within the intersubjective person-to-person relationship? How is power wielded by the time persons as paintings as compared to human persons? Does the Amatl flesh limit or change the possibilities as compared to human fleshed persons?
Well, there is clearly a power differential there, since if we take the notion of Te Shipla seriously, those are God presences, paint, ink, paper God presences. And they're clearly a lot more powerful than human beings are. That's why one approaches them with respect and I guess with gifts. And one speaks with them in the proper language. Not the everyday language that humans use with one another, but it's the language of the hidden language, the language for addressing hidden, invisible personages. I guess in any interactions with deities powerful other than human persons, there's always the possibility that they're not going to find acceptable the gifts that you have offered, that they're going to deem that you have not merited or deserved what you're asking for, and they'll simply ignore you. You have messed up. So, I mean, there's clearly an asymmetry there. And we have to figure out a way to get them to talk to us. But if we get the gift that works, of course, accepting the gift obliges them to gift in return, right? There's this whole notion in the philosophy of gifting is that if you accept my gift, you accept an obligation to re-gift. Even if you don't always consciously accept the gift. One of the ways in which this philosophy of gifting can differ from sort of modern Western sort of broad tent liberalism, this notion is that in sort of modern Western European ways of thinking, if you're given something but you didn't ask for it, you don't owe anything in response. For example, I've heard students of mine saying, yeah, we're studying this or we're studying Confucianism, and both of these views will claim that have this notion of filial duty and obligation. The children owe their parents something by virtue of being born. And I'll have students say, look, I didn't pick to be born. I didn't choose to be born. I don't owe my parents anything. That just doesn't grok with Mesoamericans or with Confucians. I mean, it doesn't matter if you accepted the gift, you got it, and now you owe something in response. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rebecca. So I hope it did, since I can't talk to you.
Thank you.
I have a meeting.
Luiza, would you select the next question, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Patricia, and thank you very much, Dr. Maffie. We have a question here from Elizabeth Jimenez, and they're asking, which correlation to the Gregorian calendar can we use to determine the date according to the Tonalamatl?
I'm sorry, which day on the calendar?
The date.
The date?
Yeah, which correlation to the Gregorian calendar?
Oh, the Tonalamatl has well, people have done it, and I don't know how to coordinate them, but scholars who focus on this, like Anthony Avini, have figured out how to correlate the Tonalamatl with the Gregorian calendar. And because as I recall, they've correlated like the day of 1521, the fall of Tenochtitlan, with a specific day of the Tonalamatl, and they can do it, but I don't know, I can't do it for you. But I mean, as you know, the Tonalamatl, standardly people say it has no astronomical correlation, although I believe Richard Halley argues that it's related to Venusian cycles, and it's not related with the solar cycle. There's a separate calendar for that, the Shiu Pohwali, right, which is 360 plus 5 days. So you look in the work of Anthony Avini and I mean, I guess if you email me, I'll try to find some other places, but it's possible. It's just not my ballywick.
Thank you. Thank you very
Sure.
much. Do we still have time for more questions? How are we on?
This part of we has all the time you want.
Yeah, we do. We do. We still have around 20 minutes.
Oh, goody.
Yep.
So let's transition to the bigger questions about project, the work, the goal, there is a question by Patricia Juarez, and is Dr. Maffie, what is your position regarding the renaming of the codices proposed by Martin, Jansen, and Gabina, Aurora, Pérez, Jimenez, where they mention that the names of many pictorial manuscripts from ancient Mesoamerica honor collectors, politicians, scholars, or institutions of the Western world, or the national elite, like the Bourbonicus Borgia, alien to the people who created them and the region to which they refer. Different usages in designating these codices and lienzos have introduced some confusion in the nomenclature. They propose a new set of names that is more or less in conformity with the contents of the documents and closer to the Mesoamerican culture. So what is your position on that, on naming?
I think it's a great idea. I think I'm sympathetic. I agree entirely that all these things are named after the people who stole them, collected them, put them in libraries, Fejer, Very Mayor, Borgia. I agree completely. And I guess, I guess for the purposes of this, the problem is that the scholarship is all sort of like colonial, isn't it? And that we know the names of these things through their colonial names, not through the other ones. If we could all just sort of like click and start calling them the new names, that would be great. There is a little bit of a problem that, Jansen, comes up with these names. Who's he to say that this is the proper name now, right? So, a very knowledgeable scholar knows the codex better than I ever will. And, it's a suitable name, compatible with the topic, but he's not an indigenous person giving it a name. He's just another European scholar saying, well, now I think we ought to call it this. So I'm happy to do that and to use his nomenclature, but I don't think it really gets us. I guess maybe, does it get us? Well, not out of the, what's that expression? Out of the frying pan into the pot or something. It gets us a little bit out of hot water, but yeah, I'm all for it. But I don't think we ought to go, yippee, we finally decolonized the titles of these things. So, good,
yes.
Good question.
Yeah. Are there other, there are other questions. They keep coming up. This is incredible, Dr. Maffie. That is just, I don't know how many people, I can't see how many people are signed up, but if somebody in the DK group knows, that would be so great to acknowledge at least the number of viewers that we have. Here is another comment from Karen Silva. Says, I just want to thank Dr. Maffie and this research group for the wonderful mind-bending talk. As a historian of the book in the Americas, I have always been interested in these objects, but now I will stop parroting the Boone Mignolo line about them. I've learned so much today, and I really look forward to the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. There's more. I think a lot of this also applies to lots of Native North American texts, that they're alive and they're meant to do something, that they're living, and they're not just, well, we call about the Constitution as a living document, but they are quite literally alive. And signatures are alive, right? I mean, one of the things I don't think it's been explored very far is that somebody signing their name is, in a sense, putting their presence on in this document, making, say, a treaty, continually affirming it. It's not just, oh, I wrote that, go it away. There's something animate being left of the signer on the treaty. Much in the same way that it's a teishipla. So yeah, I think needs to be done, and it's really fun, exciting stuff to do. So more power to you.
Yeah. And there's a question from Maria Robalino. And it's just, again, kind of like connecting the work to other work and to other ways of thinking. And says, I'm curious about how you would think about natural phenomena such as comets or volcanoes in codices like the Telleriano Remensis. Are they also ontologically present, or are they more representational in nature?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, well, that codex is seriously post-conquest, and so what's going on there, I'm not sure how representative we want it to be. But I mean, the question you raises a big question for my own view, my own interpretation, is that you remember some of the pages of the Tonalamatl, the Borbonicus, and the Alban that I showed. There was, there were all these day lords, night lords, volatiles. And then there was all this other stuff going on. There's scorpions and millipedes and, oijas, overflowing with pulque. They're decapitated heads. They're zompantlis, right? Skull racks. There's all these things that don't easily fit the description of a teishipla. And so the puzzle is, when those informants of Saogun say that the Tonalamatl contains teishipla, what's the scope of that attribution, that claim? Are they saying that everything there is? I mean, it's easy to get, the Trecena persons, the night lords, the day lords, the number persons. I'm happy to go with there. But what about all these, what I call miscellaneae? And are they, I think they're stage settings or altar settings in some way. One of the things that, they're making, one of the things that the Sandstorms talk about in altar construction is making a beautiful altar that's going to attract the relevant spirit beings. And this, I think somehow maybe they're analogously sort of setting the stage for an interaction between Tonalpoki and time persons, but I'm not sure, and I don't know what to make of those. So they could be representational. So what's going on in the codex you mentioned, I think is more straightforwardly representational, because I think it's sort of made for the Spaniards at the behest of the Spaniards, as I recall. So yeah, there's, the migration stories, remember, a lot of those, what's going on in that codex is a migration story. It's a narration. And I'm not sure what to make of them. Remember, that's why I based this on that statement from the book 4 of the Florentine Codex. It only talks about the Tonalamatl. But if you listen to, this gets further complicated by the fact that if you listen to lots of native scholars will tell you that stories are alive, and that the people in the stories, oral stories, are alive, and the people in the oral stories are alive. And this makes me wonder whether or not the migration stories that the Mexica record are in fact alive, and that there's something like a teishiplas going on there, that it's not just this picture history of the migration from Aztlan to the Valley of Mexico. It's once again, a living document, and that those figures are alive, and you need to interact with them, and they'll tell you the story. You don't just sort of make it up as you go the way we think, when you're reading a story aloud to your kid in bed at night, there's something else going on, something more powerful. Once, as Catherine Allen says, you got to take animism seriously. You got to, so thank you.
So great. We have 45 participants at some point in this lecture. So we're super excited for that. Luiza, you want to close this session with one more question by reading one more question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Patricia. We have a question here from an anonymous attendee, Dr. Maffie, asking,
Anonymous.
in the context of Indigenous futures, how can reinvigorating Tonalamatl material and immaterial frameworks inform new epistemological constructs? Can digital spaces like Zoom serve as Tonalpuki praxis, enabling a post-colonized, remembered understanding, finding altars in the time we inhabit?
Yeah, let me think. I mean, my sense of the even though contemporary Native peoples of Mexico continue to, like, with these work on altars, there tends to, a lot of the orality seems to have dropped out. I don't know. I mean, the problem is that these are I'm not sure there's anybody alive who knows how to talk with these figures anymore. So I don't know whether or not that's possible. I mean, something like this is going on, right? When those photographs, those activities I showed you that the Sandstroms are making public, with the encouragement, I might add, of the ritual specialists involved. So I'm trying to think of other ethnographies. I know there's Barbara Tedlock does some work on this. And I believe, Miguel Astor Aguilera works on this. I mean, I think there are some people, there's still some time counting going on in Mayaland, but I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question, but I don't know the answer. I'm sorry.
That is great. Thank you. And I turn this over to Dr. Cecilia Titizano.
Thank you, Patricia. Let's see here. There was a suggestion. Let me look at here again. Laura, since seems that you identify an interesting question, why don't you read it, since we have still a few more minutes left?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to, I mean, there's so many wonderful comments that are in the Q&A. And thank you everyone for all of these. One of the comments was from Marcelo Garzo, who says, I'm just summarizing, that might we consider, if there are divinized beings that are in these sacred books, might we consider that these divinized beings are somehow also imprisoned within them? So, I mean, it's a thought for all of us. And Dr. Maffie, if you want to comment on that, and I didn't read it literally. There's another one that I also want to share with you. So if you have comments about either of these, and this person is interested in understanding more about magic mushrooms, or Teonacan gato.
Teonanacat.
Yes, thank you for that. And wanting to understand about this type of possession or visitation of the time person. Is there a better linguistic or cultural way of describing the be-mushroomed experience? Would it also affect the language centers of the person taking it? And within the cultural context, would said person be considered divine temporarily for speaking in tongues or having otherworldly sounds and voices coming to them? That was quite a lot there, but anything you might want to share about your own knowledge?
Well, two questions. The first one, I mean, if these codices have been stolen and brought back to, the Vatican, they are in fact imprisoned, right? I mean, lots of Native people will say that their objects are animate, they're persons, and that putting them in museums is pretty much torturing them by separating them from their community and imprisoning them. Once again, I mean, I know Catherine Allen talks about bringing some Quechua speakers to Cusco, I believe, and looking at objects in the museum and them going, they're in there, they're suffering, they're in prison, let's liberate them. So yeah, they are imprisoned. I'm not exactly to whom we should return them to at this point, but they are in prison for sure, at least by native lights. The second question, there's a really good book on this topic by Mercedes de la Garza, I believe, called Sueño y Alucinación en el mundo, los mundos mayas y náhuatl, something like that. She talks a lot about this. It's not clear. I mean, there are sort of two different things going on. Some of being bemushroomed, as you put it, involves simply opening up this other channel of communication. And that one speaks the special language in order to communicate with the relevant time persons. And there's some contemporary accounts in which the person who consumes these substances goes into what we would call an oratory, right? A dark enclosed room so that he or she can communicate with other than human persons, communicate with deities. Other folks argue that the mushrooms themselves have or entheogens have deities within them, and it's that the person who consumes them is talking with the mushroom deities. So, at any rate, I mean, it looked like there are different things going on with different substances by different people doing different things. Be it, casting maize kernels or pulsing, a person's arm or using the Tonalamatl. I mean, I guess we don't have any direct evidence from Sagun saying that the Tonalpoki ingested these sorts of substances, but the ingestion of these substances was widespread, right? You do have accounts where, at ceremonies, at festivals, people were eating them, and banquets, people were eating them. Lots of the flower songs that, Garibay and Leon Portilla made famous, I think, are people are on bemushroomed. I mean, they're having a different kind of experience. So I tend not to see at least the Tonalpoki as this sort of talking in tongues. I mean, sort of oracle, right? Typically, I mean, if you think of oracles and for example, the Oracle of Delphi, she just kind of is this vacuous medium who just repeats, or the gods speak through her. And she really doesn't know what's going on. I think that Tonalpoki is carrying on a conversation and isn't an oracle in that sense. The Tonalpoki is speaking for the gods, not speaking as the gods, because the Tonalpoki isn't. And I'm not sure that the Tonalpoki is God possessed. But I don't know. That's a lot of those are really good. I mean, it's a good point, and I haven't figured out a lot of that part yet. There may not be a single answer, I guess. Thanks for the question.
And
Thank you.
that was a question from Trevor Hughes. I didn't acknowledge that. Yeah.
Oh, Trevor.
Thank you very much. There's so much more to talk about, especially this last topic opens a whole new chapter. this idea that we need to have these special plants in order to alter our minds, that is something that I have not heard from indigenous shamans. Instead, it is a conversation with an elder plant, an elder sister that chooses to work through us. And then through a process of peeling our faces, borrowing from your work, then we are able to hear. So it's a very different understanding, and it requires a very strong ethical way of life. It's just not in eating something so you can alter your mind. It's a completely different context.
No.
Right?
Absolutely right. It's not a bunch of kids dropping acid on the weekend and having a good time.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your work, from being with us today. In the last 2 minutes remaining, I want to pass it to Laura. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. My pleasure entirely.
Thank you. We just wanted to close our program today. I know that I'm speaking for all of my colleagues in the DK group when I say how much we respect the politics of your scholarship and the bridge building that you're creating. I mean, we're committed to seeing a university. We're committed to seeing a scholarship that has room for all of us at the table. And so those of us at the table, you know, have to find ways to be respectful and to take seriously what those of us from many different traditions, right, have, in this case, preserved, you know, for millennia and centuries and centuries under colonization. So the spirit of your work is something that that we deeply appreciate, and we just wish the best to you, Dr. Maffie, and can't wait to see the rest of your work. And I want to warmly thank the DK group, everyone that's been with you today, and all of you who joined us today. The wonderful questions. We hope that you'll come back and join us. We're putting together talks in the spring that will focus on a lot of new book publications from this past year, including, connected to today's topic, Gerardo Aldana's Calculating Brilliance, an intellectual history of Mayan astronomy at Chichen Itza. So stay tuned, you know, and looking for our newsletter, please, because we have more that we put together thinking about all of you that we hope will join us via Zoom. So sin más, gracias a todos y muy buenas noches. Have a good night, everyone. And once again, thank you, Dr. Maffie.